Welcome to No Borders with Brian and Carrie. In today's episode, what we are going to talk about is how to travel on a budget, because there are a lot of areas that you can really manage yourself and cut corners and stuff to make it work for whatever you are able to budget your travels to be spending.
I think we've gotten pretty good at it. We've cut back in some areas. We've decided to splurge in other areas, meaning we're on a budget and we know what that budget is. And I think that's the most important thing. Figure out what your budget is and go from there and figure out what works for you.
Right. So we've been traveling for going on just about 3 years, about
Already?
2.5 years.
Jeez.
Yeah. And over that time, I would say that, if you go back and you look at how we started and what our budget was, we were very conservative at that time because we didn't know we were going to be bringing anything in on YouTube. That wasn't even part of the plan.
Right.
And so we had a very strict budget that we were in. And so that's probably the first area that you have to start in. Is we sat down with each other and it was like, okay, well, how much are we willing to spend on accommodations every month?
Right.
How much are we willing to spend on food? What about entertainment?
Well, entertainment. What are we willing to sacrifice?
Right.
Because
that's kind of
there is a sacrifice. You know, when you're back home with a full-time job, you do things every weekend, every evening that you may not be doing now because you're on that strict budget. How did we get through that? Where are we at now? And what are we still doing? Some of these things, most of these things that we started doing in the very beginning, we're still doing now.
Right.
We have made maybe one adjustment, maybe two adjustments, but other than that, we're still on the same track we were when we started 3 years ago.
Yeah. So I think that the first thing that people have to do is they have to, and what we did is we came up with what was our monthly budget. Like, what were we going to be willing to spend each month per person to do full-time travels? But then we also had a yearly budget. Right. And the reason we have two budgets is because, when we go and we travel, say as the best example this last year, when we go and travel to Italy, we're definitely spending way beyond maybe what our monthly budget would be. But then we went to places like Vietnam and Thailand, and we're spending well below.
A lot less. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and we really didn't know. We had a budget, and this is the budget we're going to stick to, but we really didn't know in the beginning what we were going to get out of that budget. We had a budget. We knew we could stay. If we stayed under that budget, we'd be on task, so to speak. But we didn't know really what our travel experience would be like based off that budget.
Yeah.
And we think the experiences we had with that budget were still phenomenal. Now we've made a few adjustments along the way, but I think that we were really close even at the time.
Yeah, so we really set, what we would pay for accommodations, and this was just kind of coming up with a general idea of what we were willing to spend each month, what we felt comfortable spending every month to stay within not just a yearly, but this was a long-term plan for us.
Right.
So what were we comfortable spending? So you kind of really have to narrow in what that budget is. And then part of our yearly budget that isn't part of our monthly budget is our flights, because we come home at least a couple times a year.
Right.
And so those flights cost us sometimes $1,000, to get home.
Yeah.
And so so that was kind of a separate budget too. So I think that's really kind of the first part of budget travel, is figuring out what your budget is.
Right. Whatever budget works for you, because everybody's going to be different. Now, how do we go into, or what do we do specifically to save money?
Part of that budget, probably the biggest part, short of your, say, flights,
right,
is accommodation. And there are a lot of options. Some that we never were really personally willing to do, probably because of our age, and then also because we're not solo travelers. So one of the options for a lot of people is a hostel.
Right, and I think the hostel idea, to me, it wouldn't work simply because I want my privacy. I don't need to meet a ton of people all at once. I want my own bathroom. I'm at the age now where those things are just kind of things I'm willing to spend the money on. And we've also found in some of our Airbnbs, if we stay for 28 plus days, it breaks down individually per day about the same as it's going to cost to stay in a hostel some of the time.
Right.
So with that being said, now these aren't super amazing Airbnbs. These are budget Airbnbs.
Right.
But that's one way we're able to do it.
Well, and I think that hostel, that one is probably a much more appealing. That's an option for people who are, number one, probably a backpacker, right? You don't have a lot of things with you, because if you have a suitcase and you have a lot of stuff, where are you putting that during the day? Because the hostel is just a bed. You might have a locker you can put in, but your stuff has to fit in a locker. Our stuff wouldn't even fit in a locker.
Our stuff wouldn't fit in a locker.
Yeah, and we pack very minimalist.
Right.
So not as appealing for us, but it is an option if you're looking to save money. And then also house sitting.
Well,
is
I'm looking
another.
forward to getting started on that. We've done house sitting, obviously when we come home, but we have yet to do it on the road, and that's something that I'm excited to explore more of.
Right.
Just because we're going to get to those places where we might not be able to afford to go to, and these places also may be much nicer than our Airbnb.
Right. Well, and we found that with doing house sitting is that you're staying in someone's home, which comes with a lot of huge benefits, and one of those is like an equipped kitchen. So there's not just one knife and maybe no spatula or a really crappy fry pan that you're using. You actually have a pretty nicely equipped kitchen, and just like with you're getting an Airbnb, you get to look at all the pictures and house sitting and stuff. So we're finding that I think that will be a lot of fun, because you definitely feel like you're living a little better life. And you know, when we look at, say, our example of what we budget a month for our accommodation costs, we budget on average, I would say now, $1,200 to $1,400 a month for that. Where when we started out, we started with like a $900.
Yeah.
And we very quickly realized it didn't give us. Once again, this comes from location, because some places it got you a ton, and then some places it doesn't get you hardly anything. So we did up that area. But, when you think about it, if you can get a house sit in some of these areas for the majority of the time that you'd be staying somewhere, that's $1,400 that month that you didn't have to spend on accommodation.
Right. And that allows us to do more things, more excursions, things like that. Yeah, I mean, like I said, at our age, there are certain necessities that we want, a big bed, the kitchen, like you already mentioned, things like that. So our accommodation price has gone up, but that house sitting idea is something that
will be nice.
We'll be exploring more.
Yeah. So I think accommodations, there are a lot of different ways you can make the accommodation fit within your budget.
Right.
There's a lot of areas where you can kind of either cut corners on what you're getting, or do house sit, or do a hostel, or things like that. Even some of the Airbnbs where you're only getting the room that's in someone's home instead of the entire place might be an option, especially as a solo traveler. So then kind of going into the next area that saves us a lot of money is we slow travel. And so that's where the accommodation is a huge part of where that does save us money, is because when we are in an Airbnb and we then stay there for at least 28 days, we get a considerable discount every time that we book.
Now you do most of the bookings. Let me rephrase that. You do all of the bookings. So, I know since I do peruse through the Airbnbs and I do look, you can save 30, 40, sometimes 50%, depending on the time of year, just in staying 28 days more.
Yeah. And there have been times that we have been in a place, and I know when we were looking, for instance, when we were going to be going to Palermo and we knew we were going to be leaving early, and we still had the option of rebooking a different Airbnb. And so I looked at different options of places that were there, but it was going to cost us so much more to instead have that 28-day booking that we had, to go instead and get a 2-week or a 2.5-week rental.
It costs less to get the month-long booking and leave early than to get the 2.5-week and stay 2.5 weeks.
So I think that's the advice I'd give somebody is if you are looking and say you're only going for 3 weeks, don't just look at 3 weeks. Try that 28-day trick, because even though you might leave a week early, you could save a lot of money.
Yeah, and nobody knows you're leaving a week early.
Right. I mean, we've left early and just let our hosts know, or we let them know closer to the date that we would have been going. So, but that's another way to save some money.
So we've also found the other advantage to slow traveling is you're not getting from point A to point B as often. You're only doing it once a month.
Right.
So you're saving a lot of money on trains and buses and that sort of thing, just because you're in that one place for the entire month.
Right.
And, personally, I prefer it that way.
It's just so nice. You're not packing up your stuff every couple days and moving to the next location. But, I know when we quickly traveled through Central Europe, and every 4 days we're hopping on a new bus, a new train, and it's not just that expense. It was the expense of an Uber or taxi to get to the train or the bus station or whatever. All of those expenses, when we were done, it didn't seem like a lot at the time because it's, it's $20 here, $30 there and stuff. But when it's every 4 days.
Right. Well, it was the mental and physical expense as well.
It was a huge expense.
On me. But yeah, those nickels and dimes, they do add up.
They really add up.
You do it for a month or two, and you look back at all those, $50 bus tickets or train tickets, and before you know it, you've spent $500-$600 a month more this month just from fast traveling. Not to mention the accommodations cost more as well.
Right.
So
I think that staying in place is another way that it just saves a lot. You just, you are only then seeing one bill to get to the next location, basically.
Right.
So once a month, you really have a heavier transportation cost, which isn't necessarily a heavy one, but you just, you have your local get around transportation costs, but you're
buses,
not having
stuff
that.
like that, like city buses,
Yeah.
Subways. Another great reason to slow travel and stay in one spot is you're cooking your own meals.
Right,
So
which
you're
is
going
a
to the
huge
grocery
money
store.
savings.
We save tons of money. You're a great cook, and I appreciate that because we go to the grocery store and I have a restaurant cooked meal at home.
Not quite restaurant cooked.
But you make it with
But
love.
I appreciate you
So I
saying
love
yes.
that ingredient,
That was
right.
my special ingredient.
Your
is
special
love.
ingredient
Yes.
is love. But we save a lot of money just on that alone. And if you start adding that up along with the trains and buses to get from location to location, along with the 20 to 30 to 40% off you get on your accommodations, if you stay 28 days, you add all that up.
Right.
You're saving thousands.
Right. Well, and I think that the cooking in comes with so many benefits that we appreciate. Is first off, we just feel better when we're cooking in, but the money savings is such a huge factor of it, because when we do, once again, move fast, and so back to the Central Europe, right? And we are eating out every single day.
Yeah.
And boy, that adds up. Even if you're finding street food options and stuff, which once again, that makes you feel like crud because you're eating crappy food all the time, but I mean, it tastes good.
It tastes fantastic. It tastes really good.
It's not the best for you.
Right.
But, I think that there's just such a money savings to be able to go and not just buy. It's even hard when you're moving faster if you do decide to cook in, because you're buying simple stuff that will only be good for a couple days, where if you are in a location for 28 days, you can go and buy those seasoning and spices and a lot of those things that are maybe things you'd only use for one meal if you were there for a couple days, but you could then use it for 4 or 5 different meals during that month's time. So I think that in the long run, we find that with coffee and with all of those just basics, we are able to save a lot on groceries. So that would be a great way to just make your money go a lot further.
Yeah, and that's one thing that hasn't changed since we started traveling and won't change moving forward.
No. And one of the other benefits, I think, to slow travel as well is people, might think to themselves, well, you're just staying in one location for 28 days. That's boring. But the nice thing about it is that you might be in one location, but take day trips from that location, and go see things that are around you. You still have your place. You still saved a bunch of money on accommodations. So now maybe you have that little bit extra that you could spend on that transportation to get to those day trips or an excursion or something like that.
Right.
So you don't have to be bored. There's a lot of day trips to do away from all of these places that you're staying.
Right. If you're bored, you're boring to be with anyway.
You heard that somewhere?
I heard that. My mom told me that, I think, when I was a little kid.
Oh,
But,
stuck with you.
Yeah, it stuck with me. Yeah. Okay, and because we're slow traveling, and because you've saved a little bit of money on those long accommodations, perhaps you can leave early. And if your dates are flexible,
Right.
you can get good prices on plane tickets, other accommodations,
Right.
and so on.
Yeah, I think that finding those deals on plane tickets, people don't really realize until they start digging a little bit deeper into where the first place I go to is Google Flights. And if you just go and you look, okay, this is the day we're traveling, this is where we want to go, you're going to see one price range. But if you instead are searching on either side by a couple days or even a week, you could see a difference of half price flight, or all of a sudden some random day comes up on the calendar that shows you a price that is dramatically lower than what you're paying.
For whatever reason.
Right. For whatever reason it is. And it may be, a flight that you're not as crazy about or whatever, but it depends how much you're willing to sacrifice to save that money. But a lot of time it's no different flight. It's just a deal on that day. So having that flexibility, which because of doing what we do have that flexibility. We can sit there and we can look, and also with accommodations. So when we're looking up our places to stay, if you can adjust those dates just a little bit, not only do you sometimes find some really cool deals, but you also find that by adjusting those dates, those accommodations that maybe were already booked for that month, but if you open it up on this end and this end, then more show up.
They show up a lot more, and this would be seasonal flexibility. Mm-hmm. So spring, fall, winter, depending on where you're at in the world. Obviously, you can get those accommodations for a lot less. Mm-hmm. We plan to be home a couple times a year at least, and one of those is going to be in the middle of the summertime. Mm-hmm. So we're not traveling to the hot spots in Europe, say, in July. Right. Because we're flexible. Mm-hmm. We don't need to be there in July. We can be there in September or October. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that keeping your dates flexible is that would be a huge money saver, huge budget saver. So you're going to find that you can save a lot of money there. Where that also goes into is that with budget airlines. So be open to flying some of these budget airlines. A lot of time, once again, if you just hop on Expedia and you put in, well, I'm flying from here and I'm flying from there and these are my dates, you're going to get strictly what they're willing to offer you. But if you go to Google Flights first and you put in the information of when you're willing to fly and kind of those roundabout dates, you will have all these other options. And a lot of these budget airlines do not show up on some of these booking sites, so they don't show up on Expedia. One of the examples would be when we flew Norse Air. Right. That was the first time we had flown Norse Air, and I was trying to find us, because it was very expensive to get home from Split, Croatia to Seattle at the time of year that we were flying, because it was in the spring, and for some reason it was right around Memorial Day weekend, and for some reason the flights were just really expensive. Right. Yeah. But I was able to find us a flight where we flew to
Norway. Yeah, Oslo.
Oslo. Yeah. And I think we paid like $100 for that ticket to fly to Split to there. Maybe not even that much. Right. But then we were able to get a ticket from Oslo to JFK for, I think it was like $160. Now, okay, it's a budget airline. You're not getting any extras. They don't serve you food. Right. But we didn't really care because we were getting on the flight like at night. So it was after dinner time. So have dinner at the airport.
If I remember right, it was a brand new plane. Mm-hmm. And so as far as it was a budget airline, yes. Right. But it was a nice plane. Yeah. So we didn't get a snack.
You don't. That's really the thing. You don't get a meal.
I brought my own juice box, so I didn't need to worry about that.
your little snack pack.
Little snack pack. I had my own. But again, take your own snack. Fly a budget airline, and that did include a 6-hour layover, if I remember correctly, as well.
We were going to, no matter what, have a 4-hour layover when I was comparing any other. There was no direct flight that we were taking from Split to. We were still stopping. Seattle. We were still stopping like in London or whatever. Right. So yes, we had an additional, say, 2-hour layover. Not a huge deal when you're already there for 4. But I think that that's something that people need to look into. Is Norse is a great way. It's there's other discount airlines that are coming out that we've heard about as well. They aren't up and going yet. That once again, they're like those transatlantic crossings. So you're kind of going hub to hub. But the thing is, as soon as you get to JFK is such a great hub to fly out of anywhere into the States that you can hop. So for us, we can fly on average, it's just over $100 to fly from JFK to Seattle. Once again, that's going to be seasonal,
Seasonal,
depending on
budgeted,
what
right.
time. Yeah.
Right. But don't be, basically, bottom line, don't be afraid of the budget airlines.
Don't be afraid that we still had the movies on the back of the seat.
Yep.
The flight ended up being half full. So by the time it took off, like the guy that was sitting next to us went to another.
He left.
He left,
Yeah.
which is great. So we had the aisle to ourselves. And yeah, don't be afraid to look into those budget airlines because we've flown Norse now a couple times. We've been happy with them. We don't choose to necessarily take them if we are doing or do a budget airline. We'll say that, not Norse, but do a budget airline if we're flying a 13-hour day.
Right.
So like we do have an upcoming flight that we're going to be doing that we will be
Seattle to Dublin.
Yeah, it's like 13 hours with only a 50-minute layover.
Right.
So you're 12 hours in the air, and on a budget airline where you don't have a meal to kind of look forward to and things,
right.
or being able to pick your seat and stuff as an additional charge, we were like, we're going to go ahead and just pay it didn't end up being that much more to do a different flight.
But again, we save money over here so we can spend money on this side.
Right.
And that's kind of what we're starting to do.
Find
more
that
of.
balance.
Find that balance.
Another way that you could save some money or that has some money coming in that you have more to work with is to choose to find some kind of remote work that you can do as well.
Yeah. Now, since COVID, there's been a lot of work from home, nomadic type work where you can just be just about anywhere and do your job. I know of a few people that now are traveling full time and working from home.
Right.
I've got the little parenthesis signs up right now, the quote signs. but you can do it, and if you can pull it off, if your job will allow you,
right.
And it's a great way to bring in some money while you're full-time traveling.
Yeah. I mean, that would be, honestly, like if we weren't doing YouTube and we weren't doing other things, it would have been something I probably would have looked further into pursuing because,
right.
I'm not quite ready to that point to not have anything that I'm working on or doing, and it would give you something,
right.
just even if you're doing something part-time, but that would, the beauty of it is that traveling full-time doesn't cost a ton. It costs way less than most people imagine it will.
Right, especially if you do it the way we do it.
Right. Yeah, you can cut all of those costs. And so if you're just even working part-time and just having a little bit of extra money come in, that little bit of extra money outside of the United States goes a lot further.
Yeah. Now, all jobs, you won't be able to do this. Obviously, my previous job, excuse me, I was a traveling salesman. I had a route throughout the county I live in, and I had to see people in person. So obviously, not every job will allow you to do this,
right.
but some might, and it's something to explore. Okay, your phone plan that you're getting at home, whether you're in the UK, whether you're in the United States, you're probably paying 60, 70, 80, 90 bucks, if not more, a month for that phone plan. If you go on the road, you can get an international plan put on that for another 40 or 50 bucks. Or you can get a SIM card.
Really expensive.
Yeah, that's $150 a month. And you probably don't own your phone either because you had to have the newest and best phone. So that's another 35 bucks a month. Anyway, SIM cards are what I've been doing since we've started. So is Carrie. Now, Carrie switched over to eSIM, but we're paying like $15 a month.
Yeah, we are averaging, if you averaged out the last 2 years of us buying a SIM card on arrival, we are probably at about $15 a month because we were paying, I think in Romania we paid around $4 a month for our service.
Right.
And when we say our service, that was with a lot of gigabytes. We never ran out of data.
That was very adequate service.
Yeah.
We didn't have to worry about anything.
No, we never were in places where it was like, we honestly experienced that more when we are here at home.
Right.
We are out of service range. Just driving to the house we're at, there's this whole stretch that you drive through that we lose service. Yeah. So in general, we have better service when we're traveling. But yeah, I would say we average 15. There's a few areas that it's a bit more than that. But, with the eSIM that I now have, I'm averaging, once again, I will have like a lot of coverage, a lot of good gigabytes for $15 a month.
Right. And, I've also refused to pay for the eSIM a couple years ago. I can't remember where we were at, but it was 30, 40 bucks a month.
For the SIM card.
For the SIM card. Yeah. And I said, well, I'm just going to go without. So I just use public Wi-Fi,
Yeah.
And I use it for the whole month.
We've been places where the Wi-Fi, we did not get a SIM card because there was Wi-Fi everywhere. And I'm trying to remember.
Lagos, Portugal.
Yeah.
There were restaurants and bars all over the place, free Wi-Fi.
Well, and I think we even found, and we were kind of forced into it. So when we were in Albania, when we first got into Albania, Montenegro, we were in Kotor, we couldn't even get a SIM card. I don't know if it's what they buy people for Christmas or what.
They were sold out.
It was right over Christmas, and the whole month that we were there, we could never get a SIM card. And it ended up working out okay because every place that you would go to, every public place, there was Wi-Fi. But the beauty of it is they didn't like hide their password anywhere. Yeah. It was like on the door, it was on the menu, it was on the table, and it was always the most simple one too.
Yeah,
it was
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, or the year.
Or yeah.
So it was so simple to use, and so. There have been places where we had decided that we just didn't even need it as well. So
you can save a lot of money there as well.
Yeah, you can save a lot of money, just don't get Wi-Fi at all, or don't get any coverage.
Okay, now there's another category that I think we should cover that we don't use.
We use it very, very little.
Right, we use it very little because we don't spend a lot. If your budget is higher than ours is, whatever your budget is, everybody's got a budget, travel reward cards can save you money. Now, again, I don't use mine as much as maybe I should or could, but even if I did, it wouldn't save me a lot of money.
No. I mean, we get a 2 points on everything that we spend. I also have a card that I get 3 points on travel, anything travel. So that's, we put our flights on that one and stuff. But the thing is you have to spend quite a bit to have that really add up. So it's funny because we hear people talk about that. It's like, oh, well, we took these flights and this is all we paid for these flights. I'm like, how do you even get to the point that you'd get a flight for that? Because we don't spend enough.
Right.
We really don't.
Right. So, but if your budget is higher,
then you're going to make a lot more rewards.
Then you might want to use the rewards cards.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's also the whole getting a new card with all the sign-on bonuses.
Right.
And I know there's that whole game that people play, and that's a great game to play.
Right.
The only thing for us is to do it, once again, you have to spend enough because it might, I think that the one we got, so when we got our Capital One Venture card, I think at the time, what's in your wallet? We both had to spend $3,000 in 3 months or something.
Something like that,
and that wasn't too hard to do. But once again, at the time, we were both splitting, like we were living together, we're splitting finances. We couldn't use it on our rent.
Right.
So we really had to plan out. So we both got it prior to our trip to Portugal. Because it's like, okay, we're both going to be getting flights. We're both going to be spending a bunch of money. So we knew it'd work. Plus, it was kind of also veering into Christmas. So we were able to meet that. But some of these have like a $5,000 amount you have to meet in a 4-month period. Well, we'd never meet that.
We'd never meet that.
No.
So we really don't utilize
them. Yeah, we don't utilize
as much as others might be able to. So that's an option.
Yeah. So then the other area where you can really save a lot, depending how much you are doing this, is to stop packing so much stuff.
Yeah.
Start downsizing and minimalizing what you carry. And so we did this. We had been traveling for 6 months, 7 months, and we had a checked bag, and we had a carry-on bag, an underseat bag. So we're having to pay for that checked bag.
Right.
Sometimes it's included in your ticket, but then there's times it's not. And for us, the part that really got us when we were coming home, and we had already at that time decided, we're done with this overpacking, we're going to carry-on only, but we had to get our crap home.
Right.
And so we get home, and we took 2 flights, and it ended up we spent a ridiculous amount of money. It was near $100 or whatever each.
Yeah, I think it was $125 each. Just to get our bags home on 2 different flights. And at that point, we were a little peeved. And the funny thing about that, this is twofold. We had already decided to get rid of our checked luggage, not because of the cost, but because of the hassle. We needed to start going with carry-on only and really downsizing our luggage at that point. We do have a packing list that's available to anybody that wants our packing list.
Yes, because we've narrowed and we've really dialed that in after 2.5 years.
Right, and you get that packing list.
Yep, you can get that on our website. At the very top, you'll see an area for the packing list, and you can get that for free.
It's free, so check out that packing list, and it's a good place to, at the very least, get you started.
Just kind of to see what the essentials are, because the beauty beauty of traveling is that one thing we found, you get all those things on the road. Like if you were to forget something or you needed something new or whatever, you can get it on the road. But I think that when we were kind of doing the calculations, so if you figure how many flights you'd take in a year and what that additional cost is you pay to check a bag each time, you really have to calculate that out of what, I mean, there's a couple different ways you can look at it. Say you're on average spending $200 a year each to check a bag, and that's pretty minimal. That's pretty minimal factoring that. That's a lot of little stuff that you could buy yourself. You could be at a new place and be like, hey, I really want a new shirt, or I want a new pair of pants, or I want a new jacket or a sweatshirt, something like that. Put that money towards something different that's a lot more fun than paying to just check a bag.
Plus, you want to lug a big bag around.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
Yeah. So some of the destinations that we chose to go to the last 2.5 years, 90% of them were low-cost destinations. Destinations that maybe you wouldn't consider if you were going on vacation. Now, we're going to have a YouTube video out on why you should consider some of these places, because they're great places. We stumbled upon them because we're on a budget and we're full-time travelers.
Yeah.
So
we kind of forced, a couple things forced us into them, getting out of the Schengen zone. So we had been in Schengen for our 90 days allowed, and so we had to get out of there. And it kind of forced our hand at some of those, and thank goodness it did, because we were so happy that we got into, we went to places that we probably wouldn't have jumped into right away. One being Romania, Serbia, Bosnia, and we just thought Montenegro, Albania. These are not places that are high on people's radar of let's go vacation. And but some of them should be.
Some of them should be, and all of them were fascinating. We're traveling for the first time to like real traveling, not Mexico or Palm Springs or Hawaii, but real traveling. So all of these destinations were just fantastic, and they were all budget friendly. And that's when we started to realize, we can do this.
Yeah. Well, and I think what we also found was that was where we learned that we could balance the budget, right? So we can go to these places where, for instance, this last year we did 3 months in Italy, 2.5 months in Italy, which totally broke the bank, but we knew that going in. And part of the planning for that is we had spent 5 months in Southeast Asia, and where it was considerably less. Most of those locations in Southeast Asia were considerably less. And so we saved money that then we spent in the other area. And so we just found that it's kind of cool to do it that way, because you get to explore some of the, there are places, unfortunately, that we really want to go that are expensive to go to.
No, we can't go.
But we can go if we balance it. And we go to these places that, just off the beaten path a little bit, and push those, I don't know, for some people it's kind of pushing the boundaries maybe a little out of their comfort zone. Go check out some of these places, because honestly, we're so thankful that we did.
We got outside of our comfort zone, which was stimulating and so much fun. And it also reminded us that this is a yearly budget also. It's not just a monthly budget, but it is a yearly budget. So we can balance out where we're going in the world based on what our budget looks like.
Yeah, and that's one of the pieces of advice that I know that I've given to a lot of different people when they would ask questions about, starting this process. They're nervous about their budget. They're nervous about, what if I find that I need to save some money? I know one of the things that we talked about prior to traveling was, okay, well, what if, this is a funny one, because what if the market crashes, right? Well, what did it do? It exactly did that. It crashed, and, we were in the midst of COVID, and, at that time, you're kind of like, okay, well, I sure as heck don't want to be drawing any money out. And so what can we do? That's kind of the beauty of a lot of locations that we found, is that you can really adjust locations to what your budget is. So if you have a year that you're like, okay, this year we really need to cut costs, you can easily do that.
You can cut costs.
Head on over to Vietnam. It was just dirt cheap. It was so fun. We loved it. And you save a bunch of money. So if you have a year that you find, we really need to kind of cut back this year, or maybe you have really big plans for next year, and this year you really want to save some money, there are a lot of places that you can go to and keep the costs considerably low, and save money.
There's a lot of ways to do it. There's a lot of places to go. Argentina is on our list for 2025, and from what we understand, that is a budget saver.
Right now the dollar is American dollar is really strong there. So now another way that you can cut costs is also by kind of interact with locals a little bit, find out those non-touristy places to go visit. So instead of coming into a place, we can all go to the big touristy locations that everybody travels to. But, finding those little mom and pop restaurants that are off the beaten path, which are usually a fraction of the cost of what you're paying in the touristy areas.
Well, yeah, whenever you see, we've made this rule, whenever you see a line of people outside of a restaurant, get in line.
Yeah.
Even if you're not hungry. Get in line because it's probably going to be really good food, and it's probably going to be very affordable. We did that at a place in Chiang Mai, Thailand. We were actually told to go there from a couple of our YouTube viewers, and 2 different people told us to go to this out of the way, hole in the wall restaurant in this neighborhood. We found it, and lo and behold, there was a line of people outside this place, and we stopped in. And we went back a couple days later. It was so good. Went back
and waited an even longer line. But we were totally willing to do it because the food was amazing. And I think we paid $4 US when we left, and we got an extra bowl of soup or something that time. And then we each got a drink. So we got three different dishes and 2 drinks for that. So there's a lot of money to be saved there. But look for those little off the beaten path, because I think that's where we tend to save money. Because boy, if you stop to get food and you are right in the main area where they're all calling you in, like, come eat at our restaurant.
Look at our menu.
Look at our menu. Get out of that area and get to the little residential areas. And we found that actually in Singapore. We were in Singapore, and that we were right next to kind of the main area that was very cool and very touristy. But their food was, Singapore itself is just astronomically expensive. But we got off the beaten path and we went to that place and had Indian food. And it was just not far from our hotel, not far from that area that was so expensive.
It was in the back streets, though.
Yeah, but it was maybe 2-3 blocks away from there. And I can't remember what we paid, but it was really incredibly inexpensive.
It was incredibly inexpensive,
For Singapore especially. So we were very happy to find that. So just get off the area. So I hope that these suggestions help in budget saving. And, even if these aren't the things you do, hopefully it just spurs that ideas of areas that you can think about where you could start to cut back and save some money. And really, if you find your budget, you find your comfort point, and then you start to narrow all those other things in of where you could save some money. And as you get on the road, you're going to make adjustments like we have and figure it all out. So,
well, hopefully it inspires you. Now, we always do our question and answer segments at the end of each podcast. And one of the questions that we get the most of, we don't get the most of, but we get quite a bit that kind of falls in line with this podcast, with this episode, is that do you determine where you're going to travel based off your budget? And yes.
I would say 100%.
I think 100% yes, we do. And I think this episode kind of explained that we are very budgeted. We do decide to go certain places based on how much money we have or how much money we don't have. So
what we're willing, what our yearly budget is this time is very much decides our locations we're going to be traveling to. So like I said, if you're like, okay, this year we need to save some money, you're very much going to be looking at lower cost destinations. And those aren't only, the other thing I will add in there really quick is that, when you're looking at a location to travel to and the cost, we don't just look at accommodation, or it's such a process. It's like you have to look at the flight, you have to look at the accommodations, you have to look at the cost of living in that location, because you may get there. I think France was one place we looked and it's like, oh, we can get there for cheap, because you can get anywhere in Europe pretty inexpensive. Then we can get accommodations weren't bad, but then I looked at what it was going to cost to eat in, their grocery costs. And it was 3 times of where we were at currently. And I don't remember where that was. But I was like, so you really have to check all of those things. You can't just get there.
You can't just get there, and you have to look at cost of living, not just accommodations. So to answer the question, we do.
It very much determines our past that year. Okay, so we appreciate you listening in on this. And if you want to find us anywhere else, you can find us anywhere on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and obviously on YouTube. And all of those are at Brian and Carrie. You can also find us on our website, which is brianandcarrietravels.com, and find out a lot more information, just kind of some of our travel tips, and like we mentioned, the packing list and all those different things. So we will catch you next time. Cheers.